Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to draw a copy of a portrait by Phillipe de Champagne from 1628, presumably a portrait of his wife in a slightly turned slightly away from us, but she is looking right at us. So we're going to start by conceptualizing. Let's just start with a circle.
With charcoal?
No, with graphite pencil. We're starting with a graphite pencil. This drawing has some very subtle highlighting with white, and we are going to be adding that later. We could try something called the Loomis method. In the Loomis method, we're conceptualizing not the cranium, but we're conceptualizing a sphere. And the way it works is that the bottom of the cranium is at the bottom of this circle, so the sphere actually is bigger than the cranium. Some people like the Loomis method because you can use the Loomis method. You start every drawing with a circle, so you're not worried about the foreshortening of the cranium. And then we could imagine a center line through the middle of the face. I'm not a real expert on the Loomis method because I don't use it that much, but there's thousands of YouTube videos on it, so if you want to learn more about it, I'm probably not your guy. But the difference is simply that the way I teach it, we would have done a slightly foreshortened cranium that would have ended here. With the Loomis method, this flattening on the side of the face is what represents the bottom of this flat area is the bottom of the cranium. The top of it is roughly the hairline. The center of it is roughly the brow ridge, and then the eyes are going to be centered on the head. So that's sort of a different way to think about constructing a three-dimensional head. And then with the Loomis method, we could imagine a plane change that runs roughly from the outside of that circle down towards the chin, and then another plane change on the other side. Let's not get too carried away with that, though. Let's look at, we always look for the tilt of the eyes. And the eyes are tilting just a little bit up towards our left. So let's draw that angle. Notice that means the mouth is going to be tilting just a little bit more than that. Plane of the chin a little bit more. These are converging orthogonals. So let's start with that. And we can take a measurement, make sure the eyes are centered on the head, and they really aren't. They are decidedly, you can measure on the screen yourself, but I'm saying they're decidedly above center. So I'm going to move this line a little higher to accommodate that. And she's a very broad face, so I might want to take a measurement of the overall width of the head back to where I imagine the back of the cranium to be and compare it to the height. I'm actually going to say it's kind of interesting. If you count the hair on top, if you go from the chin to the top of the hair, that's how wide the whole drawing is from left to right. So see what I'm doing? I'm taking a measurement from the outside of the hair on the left and the right, and I'm saying it's about the same as the height of the head from the chin to the top of the hair. And that's going to give me an accurate proportion for what some artists call the envelope of the drawing, which is like the outer limit of the form, which is including the hair in this case. And I'm going to block in the hair on the left and the right. And you see now we have a sort of a sense of the volume. I think this rounded, flattened part could be a little more foreshortened. And we know basically where the eyes are going to go. She has a kind of longish nose. Remember, we look for the nose to be halfway between the brow and the bottom of the chin. But again, if we measure her, it's definitely longer than that. Would you agree? Is everyone checking that? It's like, so if her brow is about here, normally the nose would be centered. It's a little lower than that. There's something in drawings, it's really hard to explain how we know this, but as I emphasize over and over, the biggest, most common error people make in portraiture is making the nose too long. But this drawing is just so confident and believable that I'm believing that her nose was this long. Are you guys with me on that? It's like, we don't look at this drawing and think, oh, he made that mistake where he drew the nose too long. We look at it and we think, oh, that person had a pretty long nose. So that's a subtle distinction to be made. So if we're going to try to place the eyes now, and I'm sort of counting units over, so we've got 1 unit from the cheek to the bridge of the nose. Another unit takes us just inside the white of this eye. Another unit would take us to about here, and another unit to here, which is presumably about where the cranium ends. So what my thinking is like this. If I divide this in half and in half again on both sides, remember we're going from here to here, dividing it in half and then dividing the sides in half. That I'm going to use that proportion to locate the bridge of the nose, which is about 1/4 of the way over, which is about there. And I'm going to check your work in a minute, and I'm going to be looking for nobody to go racing ahead with more specific line quality, okay? I don't want to see anyone's drawing is looking like this yet, because some of you, this is all you know how to do, and you're going to want to go right in and draw all these specifics. Please don't do that. Just try to copy my line quality as we block this in. So I'm going to start to put in, and please don't shade dark with your graphite, because I think we're going to switch to charcoal with this drawing. So I'm just using this very light graphite shading to block in where the shadows are. don't go anywhere near their final value. So notice this is my halfway point, and this eye is extending slightly over that halfway point. This eye she has very heavy eyelids. So this halftone, it goes above the lid. And we're not worried about the gaze yet. We're just trying to define those eye sockets. And we're going to define the cheekbone. And there's this typical fullness. You know, your mouth has muscles that go all the way around it. And so we got this secondary fullness here. And the chin. So even in this slight of a turn, it's really important to realize that here's the center point of the nose, here's the center point of the philtrum, here's the center point of the lower lip, and here's the center point of the chin. And you see how with each, this is like a very foreshortened facial angle, right? Each thing is stepping slightly to the right. So this is slightly to the right of this, which is slightly to the right of this, which is slightly to the right of the tip of the nose, which would be about here. And a lot of people mess that up. A lot of people, accidentally place the chin to the left. If the center of the chin is to the left of the center of the mouth, then what you're implying is that the chin sticks out further than the mouth, right? And that's obviously, even in this view, we can tell that she doesn't look like that, right? So that's a valuable thing to pay attention to. Now we're going to put in some darks for the irises, and I don't want to see anyone doing this. We're just placing darks like that. And you notice that we can already read which way she's looking. We can read the placement of the eyes. This eye's drifting a little high in mine, so I'm just going to bump it down a little bit. You want to try to nail down your expression before you have committed to anything, any contours, right? We're just blocking in little bits of light and dark. We're not committed to a single contour yet. And remember, I'm doing my first shading in a left-handed manner. You're going to be going the other way if you're right-handed. And it feels weird to me to draw such a long nose, but I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. So can everyone feel how in my drawing the mouth is a little bit too low? I'm kind of cramped. My chin is a little cramped. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm just doing that and then erasing one little smudge. You see how I just scooted that mouth up without any work because I haven't committed to the mouth yet. And now we can start to read her likeness. We can read her expression. And that's what we want. We want to be able to read those things before we've committed to anything. So a little bit of form shadow under the chin. A little bit of form shadow on the side of the forehead. We are resisting the temptation to just focus on features. So, I know a lot of you heard this lecture from me like 100 times, but remember your brain has two ways of recognizing faces, your left brain and your right brain. The right brain recognizes faces by how the features are arranged in relation to each other, and the left brain analyzes each feature one at a time. And research shows that it analyzes the features from top to bottom. So there's a specific reason why artists do what I'm doing here and suppress detail in all the early stages of the drawing, because you're not giving your left brain a chance to get involved. You just want, as long as only your right brain is involved, and your right brain is better at recognizing things like likeness and expression, as long as you don't give your left brain anything to work with, then your right brain is doing all the work, and you're going to get the feel of the drawing right before you've committed to anything. You see how I'm gradually getting it to look just more and more like her, and I'm getting the mood of the drawing, the expression to match more what I'm seeing over here, without committing to any hard outlines. And I really want to emphasize how important that is. As soon as you outline an iris and put in a definite pupil, your brain stops working this way, and it becomes really difficult to see whether or not you're getting things correctly related to each other, like all the big proportional things. So, you see how I've got she's a little too jowly right here, so that's giving her a little bit of a gruesome look, so just going to trim that back a little. She's got these really broad cheekbones. And she's got a much more delicate little, I'm going to start to get that Cupid's bow shape to the mouth without even defining the line between the lips. I'm just going to refine the shape of that dark a little bit. So this is the hard part. If you can get the drawing to look halfway decent without all the details that we all love to draw, then it's like you're building the drawing on a firm foundation. And when you add the details, it's going to look great. It's going to be worth your effort. If you try to do this, if you do the details before you're happy with how things look, in this kind of vague amorphous state, you're probably going to waste a lot of time because you're going to place a detail and then you're going to realize it needs to be a little to the left or a little to the right or a little smaller or a little bigger, and then you're going to be erasing a lot of work that you spent a good deal of time on, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Okay, I'm feeling okay about this. I'm going to take a quick break and come and see how you're doing. Okay, we are going to, ready or not, we're going to start doing some details. So we are going to zoom in now and just focus on this eye. And I'm using my charcoal pencil now. And what's going to amaze you about this drawing is just the simplicity of it. There's not nearly as much detail as you think there is. Notice there is not a hard lash line. In fact, I don't know if this is deliberate or not, but she has no eyelashes. Remember on the eye, we're looking for those little shark tooth shapes of the white of the eye on either side. So pay attention to this little white shape here and this shark tooth over here. Notice that this is a HB charcoal pencil. We're seeing the underside of the eyelid here, and the white of the eye is turning into shadow over here. And look at how clearly articulated this shelf is of the lower lid. It's like, that's something that's usually missing in beginner work, is any sense of awareness that this occupies any space at all. But look at how beautifully it's shown in this drawing. So that's because there's a nice clear shadow of this cup-like form of the lower lid. And then the other dark is up here. The iris is perfectly round and fairly darkly outlined. Look carefully, you can see right here, this is the shadow of the eyelid onto the iris. And then the pupil is centered on the iris, like that. So those are our shadow accents. There's a little bit of shading. I'm going to start to shade with the direction that Phillipe used. See, he's curving around the form. In the pre-photographic era, the way artists studied the work of other artists was almost exclusively through engravings. So they did not see photographs of other people's drawings. They saw engravings, and so in an engraving, all the hatching is very methodically done. It's like if you don't know what an engraving is, look at the portrait of any president on U.S. currency, and you'll see example of hatched engraving. Okay, so the pupil's a little bigger, I'm just noticing. Notice that this dark here follows the form of the eye socket. And this dark, in some sections, follows the direction the nose grows, and in other sections cuts across. And that's very subtle work. You can see it creates a sharper edge here and then a slightly rounded, a more rounded tip. So this is where it's a good idea to just do close copying of the shading direction, because there's so much that can be learned from it. So while I'm up here, I'm going to just, I really exaggerated this cheekbone. I'm going to cut in somewhat here. You can see that he's made a lot of revisions in his work too of this contour, and he's made no effort to erase or cover any of it up. It's just all right there for us to see how he was kind of searching for that outline. Okay, we've got a strong cast shadow under the nose. And this shadow right here, so many beginners don't even put it in because it's got so much reflected light on it. So I'm going to use a kind of a light hand to put that shadow in. And that's going to help me understand the form that I'm drawing. The tip of the nose kind of wraps up and it almost connects with this. So see how this plane change basically connects up towards the outside contour of the nose. And then this nostril shows up right behind it, really nice and dark. And then the ala on this side is almost foreshortened, almost out of existence. You see how small that is? So that is not. Well, I'm going to reserve judgment. It looks a little bit off, but one thing that we're trying to learn how to do is finish our first drafts before we go back and second guess everything. You can draw and redraw the nose 4 different times, but until you can see it in relation to the rest of the face, it's probably not a good use of your time. So this shadow is fading gradually out as it goes down. So I'm switching my shading direction like that. And we have get myself out of the way there. We're going to take a close look at the mouth now. We've got the line between the lips where we said it would go here. And then we've got a horizontal. This goes straight across. And then here we're seeing the underside of the upper lip almost the way we'd see it in a profile. This is cutting in. This side of the upper lip is in shadow. The rest of the upper lip is in light, so we do not want to color it in dark. Look at the beautiful variation of line weight across this line between the lips. It gets thick right here, and then it gets thinner. And then it gets a little thicker again towards the outside. That's where her little smile is coming from, that little, very slight deepening at the corners. And we have a very slight half tone right in the center of the upper lip. A little bit of a cast shadow on this side. And a very subtle darkening. This boundary between the lip and the shadow underlip is very soft underneath. If you get discouraged about your copy, remember that copies are, more than anything else, they are inventories. No matter how bad our copies are, and sometimes mine are awful, when you get to the end of it, you can say that you've seen the whole drawing. And most people can't say that. When you glance at a drawing, you have not seen it. You can only say you've seen the whole thing after your copy is done, because that proves to yourself that you looked at every mark that the artist made. So when we learned how to shade spheres, remember core shadows. Look at look how subtle this is, this core shadow on the cheek. And you see how it makes the cheek turn away from us. It gives it that beautiful roundness. But to see this kind of convincing realism drawn with such freedom, where you can see all these searching lines along the boundary of the face, where he's letting us know that, he's not a machine. He didn't just measure everything and copy it. Okay, let's get these more of like the same scale now.
Can I have an X-Acto knife?
Okay. So we've got this, and we are going to have to continue this next time. Let's just do this one nostril, and then we'll pick it up again later. Okay, so we are resuming this drawing after a 2-day break. I want to establish the light. I need to check the amount of reflected light on this cheek. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to throw in some darks behind the head. So I'm going to darken along the edge of the forehead. And as I darken a contour like this, I'm always trying to slightly improve the outline of it. So, and today we're going to have a lesson on someone else's version of drawing hair. Everyone does it differently, but we can see that there's dark strokes that follow the direction the hair is growing through the center of these curls. And then we're curving outward. And I'm going to just do a couple light strokes to sort of define where I want to end up with these directional strokes. So I've got a big band of hair that goes sort of like this. And then right behind the cheek we have some more random marks. The key with hair is not to make it too orderly. And pay careful attention to how these strokes, basically using a technique similar to what we use on spheres, like if this is the core shadow, where every stroke coming up from this area, we're releasing into the light, and then we're going down the other way and we're releasing into the light the other way. So that the direction that you're moving your hand really matters here. Here's a few hairs that are sort of disappearing under this clump of hair. You see that? It's like barely touching the paper, but we're getting a very comprehensive set of directions of what's happening with these locks of hair. And probably the most important thing to notice here is that they are truly locks of hair. He's thinking of the hair not in terms of individual strands, but in terms of groupings. And a lot of the way that the classical artists learned that was because they learned how to draw mostly by drawing plaster casts. And when you are sculpting hair, you really have to think in terms of clumps of hair. Okay. So these accents are getting pretty dark right along the edge. It would be tempting to do a little smudging here because some of these shading effects might have been smudged by the artist, but I'm going to try to avoid that. I'm going to lift a little bit of this shadow shape coming up and to the left and down and to the left, which is suggestive of the sort of fullness of the cheek here. And I'm going to move this cup shadow down just a little bit. I'm using an HB charcoal pencil. It's plenty dark for everything I need to do. In fact, I'm having to use a very light pressure to get these effects. The tip of the nose is a little confusing because there really is no reflected light. What we have is a form shadow here, and it's just fully merging with the cast shadow. So the actual bottom of the nose is not visible in this drawing. So don't try to make it visible in yours. And notice that merging of the form and the cast shadow can be really beautiful when it's well handled as it is here. This nostril form is really in shadow. Don't mistake it for being fully lit. And this cast shadow is curving down over the muzzle form. Okay. We're gonna, this is really just it's on the edge of halftone and shadow, this sort of squarish form at the tip of the nose. So I'm going a little darker on this. And I feel like I could have gone a little darker on the iris and the pupil and this slight outline of the iris. You see what I'm just sort of going back and balancing all my darks. Sometimes I don't do that till the very last step, but today I'm sort of jumping ahead. And okay, we are gonna so the hardest thing to get right is going to be the placement of this other eye. And let's see. So usually I would just save my whites for the very last step of the drawing. However, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know what, this plane change along the bridge of the nose is really defined by the white. So see what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and put this in now, because this is going to help me to place the other eye correctly. So, and this is just really rewarding when you're drawing. Assuming your drawing's pretty solid to begin with, when you start popping in these highlights, it feels so good because the forms suddenly just become so much more legible. See this little internal highlight where the ala meets the side of the face? There's a little highlight here on the muzzle form where it meets the ala. And what you have to look out for, and I'm being totally serious right now, is like this process of putting in the highlights is so rewarding that a lot of people get carried away and they just put in too much white. The key here is restraint. And that's easy to do when you're doing a copy because we're only going to put white where Phillipe de Champagne put his white. I'm actually going in a little harder on the whites than I normally would because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing on the screen. But you can see how these little highlights really bring her to life. And there's a little bit on the chin. Just a little bit on this lower eyelid. More on the upper eyelid, but notice it's focused right here where it's turning away from the light. And just a little bit on the white of the eye, but only the inside corner, not the outside corner. Okay, so now we can see the structure of the head much more clearly, and hopefully that will enable us to do a better job of placing this other eye. As I look at my drawing, it feels like the eye on the right is just a tiny bit droopy. So what I'm going to do when I put my first dark in, I'm just conscious of elevating it just a hair, like literally just a couple hairs widths. And I'm going to experiment with, I was feeling good about this iris placement before, so I'm going to stick with that. And the actual pupil is centered on there. So what I'm happy about is it feels like the gaze is similar in my drawing to the original, and that's what we're looking for. Now, I'm always warning you not to outline the lower eyelid, and you can really see here there's absolutely no black on there. The whole lower lid is defined just with white. And I guess we can go ahead and put that in. But see how soft it is? So instead of doing like shading this way, I'm going to do some little hatching marks, and I'm going to follow the form of that lower lid with vertical hatching marks all the way across. And that's going to keep it looking nice and soft and not like it's not like a razor sharp edge. And we've got just a little halftone right under that white. It's not a shadow, so I'm actually going to switch back to my graphite pencil for this because I'm having a hard time with making the charcoal faint enough. These halftones are very, very subtle. Yeah, let's try it with graphite instead. I hope everyone's getting used to the vocabulary, which is this is a shadow over here. It's actually not receiving direct light. And this is a halftone, which is receiving direct light, but just it's angling away from the light, so it's receiving a little less light than the zones around it. There's another halftone at the corner of the eye that defines this plane change. And there's another halftone here that defines where this cheek is turning in towards the ala. And I'm just sticking with graphite for these. Normally I don't like the look of graphite and charcoal in the same drawing, but I would probably rather have used like a Wolf's Carbon pencil, but this is going to have to do for today. And there's another halftone around the corner of the mouth here. It's very significant for expression. And there's some halftones above and below the corner of this mouth, which is leading it to be lit up. And finally, there's a big halftone in the inside corner of the lid. I'll tell you a thing that took me a long time to figure out, which really shouldn't have, I just was never taught properly, but we all know that there's highlights on outside corners like this. We have a harder time reading the way you can have a highlight in an inside corner like this. So we've got a halftone here, and we have a halftone on the eyelid, and in between it lightens. And I hope everyone can sort of make sense of that. All that's happening is when you have a highlight that's coming on the outside of the form, it's just that zone that the light is reaching most directly, right? This plane is reaching light directly. These two planes are falling away from the light. When we fold it the other way, and if we assume the light is still from above, okay, hang on. The same thing happens. See that? It's like lighter in the middle, and it's angling away from the light on the edges. So it's really hard to tell sometimes, like which way it's going, because it's almost exactly the same effect. Okay, so here's that internal highlight we were talking about. This halftone, the way this slight tension at the brow is really significant for expression. And I know I say the same things over and over again, but it's really important to understand how similar figurative drawing and painting is to acting. Actors are trying to create legible emotions with their faces, and figurative artists are trying to create legible emotion with other people's faces. But in either case, a competent viewer can tell whether it looks fake or not, right? You can tell if somebody who's acting is emoting too much and exaggerating too much, and the feeling isn't realistic. And you can also tell in a drawing or painting if the emotion is believable. And often it isn't. But that's what makes it such a interesting thing to learn how to do, because you can literally spend a lifetime trying to get the desired expression into a face. Likeness is one thing, expression is like a whole other challenge, that your brain, for the same reason that your brain is really good at likeness recognition, your brain has to be really good at emotional recognition. And you know that it's an inborn ability because it's something that babies can literally do. Like, babies know when their mothers are upset. Okay. So we're getting close to being done here. I hope I'm not going way too fast, but you can go back and work on these later if you want. You'll have access to the original image on Canvas. Or if you're at home, I'll tell you where you can download a high-resolution picture of this. I'm just noticing that my drawing looks a little more masculine than the original. And usually that's a matter of giving the person just a little too much chin. You see how this curve here is let's check this. In my drawing, in the original, if we drop down from here, the whole chin is to the right of that. I think I'm pretty good with that. I don't know what it is. Maybe she just needs more hair. I had long hair in my late teens, and everybody thought I was a woman, so. Okay. One thing that will help is a little bit more shading on the chin. That's going to sort of visually tuck it back under the bottom lip. Maybe a little more shadow under the bottom lip to make the bottom lip project further. yeah, those things helped a little. And now hair. Let's zoom out again. So one thing to avoid, we're simplifying the heck out of the hair, but one thing to always avoid is too much of a firm boundary between the hair and the skin along the hairline. Obviously, this is a firm boundary here because the forehead is overlapping the hair. But wherever the hair is overlapping the skin, like up here, we want to make sure we create a very loose boundary, because otherwise the hair will look like a wig or a toupee. Do people still wear toupees? Does anyone have a family member who wears a toupee? You know what a toupee is, right? Are you all familiar with the word toupee? Yeah. It's a man's wig, right? So there's that. Oh, look, I messed up the perspective. Look at that. My orthogonals are not converging, people. Well, to be honest, they're not quite converging in the original. So maybe this isn't a perfect rectangle. So I am going to say it's going to be difficult to get this effect without a little smudging. So we might end up, but let's just try to do I'm using the side of my pencil to shade this dark. And there's this dark, and there's this dark. So I bet your English teachers have told you that you have to learn the rules so that you can break the rules. Have you heard that before? Like you'll read a poem by a great 20th century poet and they won't capitalize the first letter of every sentence. And then your teacher gives you points off for not doing that. And when you say, but look, this famous poet doesn't do it, the teacher says, well, you have to show me you know the rules. If you have a lot of mastery, you can get away with a lot. And this artist is basically doing something I wouldn't do, which is shading white on top of black charcoal. And the reason that's a dangerous thing to do is because the white pencil is going to pick up some of that gray, and you'll end up with a whole different color. You'll end up with a colored midtone that doesn't match the color of your paper, which is usually not a pleasant thing to look at. But he's used such a delicate touch with the white that he sort of gets away with it. So we will experiment with that in a minute. I'm not talking about what I'm drawing very much right now because it's pretty straightforward. We are just trying to copy how this guy did the hair. Let's zoom in on this zone. can everyone appreciate like just how little there is here, but what a great effect it produces? So there's a first shading under here. I'm gonna just very lightly smudge it with my finger, not pressing too hard. And then there's these like, in drawing we call these moves calligraphic, which comes from the word calligraphy. And it's sort of like these beautiful little flourishes and curly cues. And it takes a little practice. You can see I'm not doing it nearly as gracefully as Phillipe did it, but I'm trying to give you a little sense of what's going on here. And calligraphy is something that's utterly lacking in drawings by Dylan. Sorry, Dylan, I talk about you in every video now, but you know, I wouldn't blame you for thinking I'm just jealous because he's got so many more subscribers than I have. Drawings by Dylan. Yeah, he's an Instagram artist. He spends like 500 hours on a drawing, and you can see every pore and every like bead of sweat. They're a little gross.
Wait, so I feel like you're just jealous.
That's what I just said, Olivia. I just owned it. I am up to 900 subscribers, so,
How many viewers are you getting?
how many viewers?
Like,
How much engagement? I don't know.
what's your average view count on a video?
I think I had like 5,000 on one, but usually I get like 50, so.
So that's 50 people.
Yeah, I do have people out there in the world that watch these, believe it or not. I just upload them for you guys, but people do hop on board.
Why is the school allowed that?
Well, YouTube is, we're also going to host all these gigabytes of material, The school doesn't have its own server anymore, so. The first videos I ever did, I was hosting them on Amazon. You had to like pay a fee every month just to have them there. Amazon Web Services. But YouTube is totally free. YouTube is free because they force you guys to like watch their ads when you're doing your homework. So. Oh, I should start a Patreon. Yeah, like get some rich people to be like, we want to support Alex teaching. That would be good. Yeah, but where else are you going to see this kind of content, huh? Not only the drawing, but just the stream of consciousness. This is what Donald Trump calls the weave. I just talk and talk without any kind of plan.
Authentic.
Yeah, it's authentic. That's what people craved in today's social media environment, right? Authenticity.
Authenticity from Mr. Allen.
Yeah. No, I think people just watch because they want to. It's so valuable to do copies, but you need to know what to look for and like what makes the drawing special. Those are definitely my most watched videos are where we copy masterworks. There's not a whole lot of people doing that. But if I was just starting out learning how to do copies, I'd much rather have somebody kind of.
What's your account called?
It's called the Art Room, but to find it you have to look for Lime Skulls, and then I'm the LYME and then Skulls. That's the only. Because I had a really bad name. Like my actual URL is very hard to remember. It's like Blalock at youtube.com, but it's spelled letter U, Tube. Yeah, I don't know why I ever thought of that, but. Okay, so we're almost done here. I'm going to call your attention to one last important fact here that it really comes in when especially when we're using white, okay? So usually what beginners do is they hone in on the small lights, like this one and this one and this one, the ones we did already, and they totally overlook the big lights. But notice that this area up here is just as bright. We just don't notice it as much because it's a big area. It doesn't have dark all around it. So let's put in some of our big lights. There's the light on the forehead. Here's the light on the cheek. There's a little bit of light along the side of the nose. And there's a strong light right here by that dimple at the corner of the mouth. That really helps bring out the smile. Yes. Yep. A little bit of light on the jawline and a little bit of light on the neck. And finally, we're gonna, I thought I did such a good job on the gaze, but now it's feeling like I need to have her looking slightly more to our right, so let me just try adjusting that slightly. Yeah, that's a little better. Yeah, the longer I look at this, the less I like it. That happens a lot, though. What usually happens is I hate the drawing when I first do it because it doesn't look exactly like the original, and then I'm going to look at it later and I'm going to say, like, yeah, that's okay. It's not just like the original, but it looks like a drawing I would do, so. Because I do have kind of my own style, so. And that's allowed in my book. Okay, let's zoom out. This is the equivalent for you of stepping back. Get a little distance between you and your work. And yeah, now I can see everything that's wrong with it, but we are not going to start over. We're too close to the end here. But you guys take a step back. Some of yours are going to look better than mine, which I accept gracefully. It sounds like Kathy's paying us her daily visit. Oh, we didn't do that. Okay, let's do a little experiment. We're going to go ahead, lightly smudge this side of the back of the head, and then we're going to go right on top of the smudging with white and see what happens. Yeah, it works okay. I don't know. He looks better in his drawing. gonna just go a little darker on the top of the head, and then we're gonna call it a day. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and smudge this just like he did. Okay, that's gonna do it for us. So thanks as always to everyone at home for watching my content. What should they remember to do, guys? Remember to smash those like and subscribe buttons.
And turn on that notification bell.
Oh, turn on that notification bell so you're alerted to new content. Mr. Rady says I speak in too much of a monotone in these videos. I need some,
Sound very monotone.
You gotta put a real.
Naomi, maybe you can give me some coaching.
More like, you should get a soundboard.
A soundboard and just like, yeah, maybe I should warp my voice through some, maybe I need some reverb.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay, so long, everybody. Thank you for watching. Do you want to see any of this? Does anyone want to share their work with the YouTube audience? Not today?
I'll share mine.
You didn't finish yours.
I don't.
Okay. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.